Thanks for staying with us on Point. South Africa's fight against corruption is said to have stagnated over the last 10 years. That's according to the latest Transparency International Corruption Perception Index that was released today. The index shows that South Africa, along with many other countries, have reached an almost virtual standstill in its efforts to fight corruption. South Africa's score on the index since 2012 shows stagnation. In 2012, South Africa scored 43, ranking 69 out of 176 countries. Last year, the country scored 44, dropping one place in rank to 70 out of the now 180 countries. The highest index score over the past decade was 45 in 2016, while the lowest score was 42 on the 2013 index. Now, let's get more comment on this index. I'm joined by Cas Coovadia, the CEO at Business Unity South Africa. Just your reaction to that report.
Well, I haven't had the opportunity to look at the report in detail, but I don't think it's surprising, the findings. We know that in the last 10 years, corruption, particularly under the Zuma administration, was significant, and it has essentially become endemic in these 10 years. I think that President Ramaphosa moved quite quickly with the appointment, with empowering the Zondo Commission to do what it needs to do. We now have the part one of the report, and I think that we'd improve our ratings if the recommendations in part one of the report are... Sorry about this.
No worries.
Recommendations in the report are implemented as a matter of urgency, because we'd only demonstrate that we are serious about fighting corruption if we begin to investigate the people and the institutions, both in the public and private sector, that the first part of the report has identified, and where there are cases to be made, to bring those cases to court and prosecute.
All right. Professor Stephen Friedman wrote this article about how corruption is deeply rooted in the country's past, and almost laying out the case that at no point in South Africa's history have we not had deep corruption that's embedded, and therefore it's almost a part of who we are. What would you say to that in terms of reports that say, perhaps corruption is getting worse in this period?
Well, I have no doubt that there was corruption during the time of apartheid as well. The National Party government could not have ruled this country and could not have profited from this country without corruption. There's absolutely no doubt about it. So I agree with Stephen on that. But having said that, I don't think we should say that as a result of that, given that it was prevalent then and it's prevalent now, that it's a way of life and we need to accept it. We need to fight it with every fiber in our body. I think the Zondo Commission, the part one of the report, gives us the opportunity to do that. I think it's an inflection point in our country, and once we get all three parts of the report, I think it affords us the opportunity to reset our moral compass and begin to become a society that's, resets the moral compass and begins to operate in a way that's morally sound. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to use the opportunity of the reports to do that.
All right. Talk to us about the role that business plays in South Africa when it comes to corruption. We've seen over the years that corruption isn't in one sector, public or private, but they enable each other, and that's how they continue. What's the role in particular of business in curbing corruption?
Well, there's absolutely no doubt, and BUSA has been public about this, that there's two sides to corruption. There's the corruptor and the corruptee, and some businesses have undoubtedly been found wanting in over a number of years. That doesn't mean that business as a constituency is corrupt, or that corruption is endemic in business as a constituency, just like corruption is not endemic as in government as a constituency, there are significant parts of government that have been identified to have acted corruptly. So we need to recognize that there's two sides to the coin. And we've been absolutely clear that in investigating those that the Zondo report has identified, both corporates and government and state-owned entities and others must be investigated. We're not saying that those businesses that have been mentioned should not be investigated. They should be investigated. If there's a case to be made, they should be prosecuted. And I think that as organized business formations, we need to keep top of mind and top of agenda to consistently talk to our members and encourage our members to behave and conduct their business in a way that is morally correct, in a way that they make their profits in a responsible and sustainable way, and in a way that we limit drastically the involvement of business in corruption.
Right, so when we're looking at this transparency report, I know you said you haven't had sight of it. One of the examples it gives is, Mozambique. They're saying it's a country to watch. Business people arranged loans around $2 billion at least in question. And throughout the countries that it mentions, it speaks about capital flight due to corruption, whether it's in Senegal, Mozambique, or, of course, South Africa. What's the direct impact on us living in South Africa of corruption? Because when we're speaking about these big numbers, it sometimes doesn't make sense to us, or perhaps we don't think that it affects us directly.
Well, in South Africa, I think we must talk about corruption and state capture. And what, between the two of them, what they've done is they've gutted government. They've gutted critical institutions of government that are beginning to rebuild to a certain extent. And this was a deliberate agenda by the Zuma administration to do that, so that once institutions are gutted, you can actually loot. And that's what's happened here. And who suffers the most? When state institutions are gutted, they are unable to actually do the work they're supposed to do, which is to actually provide services to the people of South Africa. The people to suffer most are those who do not have many choices, who are dependent on public services, who are dependent on an effective government. And so the poor people in our country suffer the most. On the other side of the spectrum, these institutions being gutted also means that government has been unable to create an environment for investment in this country. And as a result of that, investors do not have the confidence and have not had the confidence to invest. We are working hard to turn that around. And if we don't get invested in the country, we don't get economic growth. And so we don't increase the tax pie, and the state doesn't have the resources to actually do what it needs to do in a responsible way. So the impact of corruption, and in our case, state capture as well, is across the board, from the inability to do business, or it makes doing business more expensive because you have to grease palms. It means that we don't have economic growth. That means we don't have a broader and deeper tax base. That means the state has to borrow more and pay more to service its debt. And it's a vicious cycle. And at the end of the day, the poorest of the poor suffer.
Thank you very much, Cas Coovadia, the CEO at Business Unity South Africa, for your insight into corruption and its effects. Thanks so much.